Captain Kale Vance stared at the encrypted transmission, the blue light from the console casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. 30 years old with the eyes of someone much older, he ran a hand through his dark hair and sighed. The offer from Xylos Corp was suspiciously generous, triple his usual rate for a simple biological cargo transport from the remote Tiberius station to a secure facility in Coalition core space. Stardust needs those repairs, he muttered to himself, glancing around the cramped cockpit of his light transport vessel. The Stardust drifter wasn't much to look at, but she was reliable, mostly, and more importantly, she was his. After years of flying combat missions for the Coalition, the freedom of the Outer Rim and answering to no one but himself made the constant struggle to keep the ship running worthwhile. Kale reread the sparse mission details. Transport sensitive biological cargo labeled Subject Lyra with absolute confidentiality. No questions asked. His instincts warned him that anything paying this well came with complications. But the alternative was taking on 3 or 4 standard shipping jobs, and his hyperdrive wouldn't last that long without maintenance. Accept contract, he said finally, and the screen flashed green in confirmation. Whatever this Subject Lyra was, it would fund his repairs and keep him flying for months. That was all that mattered. 2 weeks later, Kale docked at Tiberius Station, a sterile, gleaming structure hanging in unexplored space well beyond standard Coalition patrol routes. The station appeared oddly quiet for its size, with bare minimum life support readings and only a skeleton crew visible through the viewport. A slender woman with sharp features and calculating eyes met him at the airlock. Captain Vance, I am Dr. Eris Thorne, lead researcher on the Lyra project. You're precisely on time, good. Her tone was clinical, impersonal, as she led him through antiseptic white corridors. 2 armed security personnel followed at a discreet distance, their Xylos Corp insignias partially obscured by tactical gear. The cargo is extremely valuable, Dr. Thorne continued without looking at him. It must remain in stasis for the duration of transport. The containment pod is self-regulated, but you'll need to monitor its status regularly. Under no circumstances are you to open it or attempt interaction. Is that understood? Perfectly, Kale replied, keeping his expression neutral. I'm just a courier. They entered a laboratory where several white-coated scientists worked silently around a cylindrical stasis chamber. Kale's steps faltered when he saw who was inside. The cargo was humanoid, female, with delicate features and a slender frame. Her skin was a pale blue-green, and her silvery hair floated around her face in the suspension fluid. She appeared peaceful in her drug-induced sleep, but Kale noticed marks on her wrists and ankles that looked suspiciously like restraint abrasions. This is Subject Lyra, Dr. Thorne said, observing Kale's reaction closely. She's heavily sedated and will remain so throughout the journey. The pod is programmed to maintain optimal chemical balance. You didn't mention the cargo was a person, Kale said carefully. Subject Lyra is not a person, Captain. She's a valuable scientific specimen. Thorne corrected him with a cold smile. The first of her kind to be studied extensively. Her biological composition offers unprecedented research opportunities for Xylos Corporation. Kale swallowed his objections. The money. Focus on the money and the repairs. How do I transport the pod to my ship? Within the hour, the stasis pod was secured in his cargo hold, and Kale was preparing for departure. As Tiberius Station shrank in his rear view screen, he couldn't shake the image of the sleeping alien woman from his mind. He'd transported questionable cargo before. The Outer Rim wasn't known for its strict adherence to Coalition regulations, but never a living, sentient being treated as property. For 3 days, Kale followed his assigned route, avoiding standard shipping lanes as instructed. He checked the stasis pod readings regularly, finding comfort in their steady, unchanged status. The woman, Subject Lyra, remained motionless, suspended in artificial sleep. On the 4th day, everything changed. Kale was plotting their next jump when a strange energy surge rippled through the ship. The lights flickered and alarms blared from multiple systems simultaneously. What the hell? He raced through damage control protocols, stabilizing the primary systems. Whatever had hit them was unlike any energy pattern he'd encountered before. Not a weapon or natural phenomenon on any coalition database. The cargo hold alert caught his attention next. The stasis pod sedation system was failing. Security footage showed Lyra beginning to stir within the pod, her movements sluggish at first, then increasingly. Panicked as consciousness returned. Her eyes flew open, iridescent silver with hints of blue, and she began pounding against the transparent enclosure, mouth open in a silent scream. Cale hesitated, Dr. Thorne's warnings echoing in his mind, but watching the woman's terror overwhelmed his caution. He couldn't stand by while she injured herself in panic. Against all his better judgment, he grabbed an emergency sedative injector from the medical kit and sprinted to the cargo hold. When he arrived, Lyra was fully conscious and thrashing violently inside the pod, her silver hair whipping around her face. Silvery tears streamed down her blue-tinted cheeks as she gasped for breath in the now malfunctioning suspension fluid. Cale overrode the emergency protocols and drained the pod. As the enclosure hissed open, Lyra collapsed forward, coughing and trembling. He caught her before she hit the floor, surprised by how light she felt despite being nearly as tall as he was. She recoiled from his touch with a strangled cry, scrambling away until her back hit the wall. Her chest heaved with rapid breaths, her wide silver eyes never leaving him. "I'm not going to hurt you," Cale said, slowly raising his empty hands. The sedative injector remained clipped to his belt, untouched. "My name is Cale. I'm the captain of this ship." Lyra didn't respond, except to press herself more firmly against the wall. Up close, Cale noticed faint, almost invisible markings across her skin, pale lines that formed intricate patterns like circuits or writing. He tried again, speaking slowly and keeping his distance. "Do you understand me?" Still nothing. He retrieved a thermal blanket from an emergency kit and cautiously extended it toward her. After a moment's hesitation, she reached out with trembling fingers to take it, wrapping it tightly around her shoulders. The simple synthcloth garment she wore offered little warmth or dignity. Cale activated his ship's basic translation unit, but the results were minimal. Her language was too complex, too ancient for the outdated software to process more than the simplest concepts. Cold, the unit translated when she finally spoke in a melodic, resonant voice. "Fear, you're safe," Cale responded, unsure if she could understand him. "I won't return you to the pod." Her silver eyes studied him with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. Cale set up a temporary space for her in a corner of the cargo hold, bringing water, nutrition packs, and more blankets. He considered contacting Xylos Corp about the pod malfunction, but found himself hesitating. Something about this entire situation felt wrong, and until he understood more, he decided to maintain radio silence. Over the next 2 days, Lyra remained primarily in her corner, watching Cale warily whenever he entered the cargo hold. The translation unit made minimal progress with her language, capturing only basic words and concepts. She would accept food and water from him, but flinched if he came too close. On the 6th day of their journey, the Stardust Drifter encountered disaster. Following the route provided by Xylos to avoid standard patrol zones, they entered an unstable nebula region not properly documented on updated charts. Without warning, the ship plunged into a violent radiation storm. Alarms screamed throughout the vessel as external systems took heavy damage. Cale fought to maintain control, his hands flying across the console. "Hold together, girl," he muttered to his ship as he diverted power to the shields. When the initial wave passed, the damage assessment made his heart sink. The storm had critically damaged multiple systems, including life support. Worst of all, the environmental controls were failing. Cabin temperature was already dropping rapidly, especially in the larger cargo bay. Cale redirected what power remained to maintain core systems and keep the cockpit habitable. He pulled on his thermal gear and went to check on Lyra. The cargo hold was already significantly colder, his breath visible in the air. He found Lyra huddled in her corner, violently shivering. Her blue-green skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and the nearly invisible markings on her skin seemed to be fading even further. "Not good," Kale muttered, crouching beside her. The standard thermal blankets were clearly insufficient. Whatever species she was, they apparently had poor cold tolerance. She looked up at him with dulled silver eyes, her trembling beyond control. He scanned the environmental readings. The temperature would continue dropping for hours before emergency repairs could be implemented. Lyra wouldn't survive that long in these conditions. Kale weighed his options. The cockpit was the warmest remaining area, and he had his emergency high-tech thermal sleeping bag, self-heating and designed for survival in extreme conditions. It was meant for one person, but it would fit two in close quarters. His moral compass wrestled with his contract. Obligations. If Lyra died, he'd fail the mission. More importantly, he couldn't stand by and watch a sentient being freeze to death when he could prevent it. Decision made, Kale approached Lyra with the translation unit. He struggled to convey his meaning with the limited vocabulary it had compiled. "Cold, dangerous," he said, gesturing to the cargo hold. "Warm, cockpit." He pantomimed sleeping and pointed to himself, then to her. "Chair, safe." Lyra stared at him, confusion and desperation warring in her expression. She was too weakened by the cold to reject any offer of warmth, however uncertain. "Trust." The translation unit rendered her faint response. Kale nodded solemnly. "Trust," he confirmed. With obvious reluctance, but driven by necessity, Lyra allowed Kale to help her to her feet. Her body trembled uncontrollably against him as he guided her to the cockpit. Her skin felt alarmingly cool to the touch, reinforcing his concern about her deteriorating condition. In the cockpit, Kale quickly set up the thermal sleeping bag, activating its internal heating system. The small space was cramped but warmer than the rest of the ship. He hesitated, then gestured to the open bag. Lyra looked at it, then at him, a flicker of understanding and apprehension crossing her features. With obvious reluctance, but driven by physical necessity, she slipped into the sleeping bag. Kale followed, trying to maintain as much distance as possible in the confined space, an awkward tension filling the air between them. "Better?" he asked, the translation unit placed nearby. She nodded silently, still shivering but less violently. They lay side by side, bodies rigid with mutual discomfort, as the sleeping bag's heating elements gradually warmed the space around them. After several minutes, Lyra's trembling began to subside. Kale started to relax, thinking the worst had passed. Then something extraordinary happened. As Lyra's body temperature rose and her proximity to Kale's biological energy increased, the faint markings on her skin suddenly illuminated. What had been nearly invisible lines flared into brilliant networks of blue-silver light, forming complex, symmetrical patterns across her exposed skin. The light spread, enveloping both of them in a soft azure glow within the confines of the sleeping bag. But the visual phenomenon was only the beginning. Kale gasped as a sudden rush of sensations and images flooded his mind. Not coherent thoughts, but powerful emotions and fractured visions. The terror of being pursued, the loss of a luminous homeland, a deep connection to the energy of stars, and profound sorrow. Simultaneously, he sensed Lyra's confusion and fear as this connection formed uncontrollably between them. He realized with shock that she was experiencing his own anxiety, compassion, and underlying loneliness. This wasn't intentional physical contact, but an unwanted energy/spiritual resonance triggered by their proximity and Lyra's vulnerable state. The connection lasted only moments before fading as Lyra frantically severed it, but the impression remained. They both lay gasping, staring at each other in shock. Lyra's eyes reflected horror as she realized Kale had glimpsed what she truly was and what she was hiding. Kale stared back, his initial suspicion transformed into astonishment and the profound realization that Lyra was not simply a victim or cargo. She was something entirely different and powerful. The unexpected event had completely altered the dynamic between them. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken revelations. Lyra was the first to move, drawing slightly away within the confines of the sleeping bag, her luminous markings dimming but not disappearing entirely. "What was that?" Kale finally managed, his voice hoarse. Lyra regarded him with new wariness, but also a reluctant recognition that something had fundamentally changed between them. She reached for the translation unit, focusing intently on it. To Kale's surprise, the device suddenly functioned more effectively, as if her energy was enhancing its capabilities. Connection. Unintended. The translation came through clearer than before. "You saw." Kale nodded slowly. "I felt something. Your fear. A place of light. Being hunted." Lyra's silver eyes widened. She hesitated, then deliberately placed her fingertips on the translator again, channeling more energy into it. The device hummed, its capacity expanding under her influence. "Not cargo," she said, her translated voice stronger. "Scientist. Prisoner. Escape." Over the next few hours, as they remained huddled in the sleeping bag while the ship's systems struggled to recover, a fragile trust developed. Lyra, recognizing that Kale hadn't reacted with hostility to their accidental connection, gradually revealed her truth. She was Xylosian, a species with the ability to sense and interact with cosmic energy flows. Not an experimental subject, but a young energy researcher who had been fleeing. Dr. Thorne and Xylos Corp weren't scientists, but a secret branch of a militaristic faction called the Scourge, which sought to capture Xylosians to exploit their abilities as energy weapons or infinite power sources. Tiberia's station had been a trap. "They hunt all Xylosian," she explained through the enhanced translator, "for our connection to star energy. They experiment, extract, weaponize." As her story unfolded, Kale felt a growing certainty that he could not complete his contract with Xylos Corp. Whether driven by moral imperative or the lingering effects of their connection, he knew he couldn't deliver Lyra to what sounded like torture and exploitation. "I won't take you to them," he said finally, "but that makes me a target too. The Scourge won't just let this go." "Dangerous for you," Lyra acknowledged, genuine concern in her silver eyes. "I've handled dangerous before," Kale replied with a grim smile. "Former Coalition fighter pilot, remember? I showed you that when we connected." A ghost of a smile flickered across Lyra's face. "Yes, brave, reckless. We need a plan," Kale said, sitting up as much as the sleeping bag allowed. The ship's temperature was starting to stabilize, though still colder than normal. "I know some neutral worlds, or we could try to contact other Xylosians if you know how." "There are ways," Lyra said cautiously. "Hidden networks, but needs secure communication. First, we need to evade Xylos. They'll notice when I miss the next scheduled check-in and go off course." Kale pulled up the ship's navigation system on a nearby console. "We'll change course immediately. I know the outer rim better than they do." As if summoned by his words, the ship's proximity alarm blared. A vessel had appeared on long-range sensors, moving fast on an intercept course. "They found us already?" Kale hurried to the pilot's seat, bringing up tactical displays. Lyra closed her eyes, her luminous markings pulsing slightly. "Scourge ship," she confirmed. "I can feel their energy signature." Kale's hands flew across the controls, redirecting power to the engines. "We're about to see if your trust in me was justified," he said grimly. "Hold on." The Stardust drifter lurched as Kale pushed its damaged systems to the limit, veering away from their pursuer and toward a dense asteroid field nearby. What followed was a desperate game of cat and mouse. The Scourge vessel was smaller and faster, but Kale knew every quirk of his ship and every trick in the combat pilot's handbook. He wove through impossible gaps between asteroids, used gravity wells to slingshot around larger bodies, and executed a series of unpredictable maneuvers that kept the pursuing ship at bay. But the Stardust's damaged systems couldn't maintain such stress indefinitely. "They're closing," Kale muttered as warning lights flashed across his console. Lyra stood behind him, gripping the back of his chair, her markings pulsing with increasing brightness. "I can help," she said quietly. "Ow!" Disruption. Brief. Costs energy. Her silver eyes met his. Trust. Kale nodded without hesitation. Do it. Lyra closed her eyes, her luminous patterns intensifying until they seemed to ripple beneath her skin. She extended her hands toward the view screen, fingers spreading as if reaching for something invisible. A subtle vibration passed through the ship, and for a moment, Kale felt a strange resonance similar to their earlier connection, but focused outward. On the tactical display, the pursuing ship's trajectory suddenly wavered, its sensors apparently malfunctioning. Kale seized the opportunity, diving the stardust into a dense debris field and cutting all non-essential power. For several tense minutes, they drifted silently among the fragments of long-destroyed vessels until the tactical display showed the Scourge ship moving away, having lost their trail. Kale released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was incredible. He turned to find Lyra leaning heavily against the wall, her markings dimmed significantly. He rushed to support her before she collapsed. Energy, drain, she managed weakly. Need, recovery. Kale helped her back to the sleeping bag, which remained the warmest place on the ship. Rest, he said. You've earned it. I'll keep us moving. As Lyra slept, Kale plotted their next moves. They needed repairs, supplies, and a secure communication point. There was only one place in this sector that offered all three while remaining outside Coalition jurisdiction and Scourge influence. Ouroboros Gateway, a notorious free port known for its chaos and lack of questions. When Lyra awoke hours later, he shared his plan. It's not the safest place, he admitted, but it's our best option. The Gateway has a policy of neutrality that even the Scourge hesitate to violate openly. You know this place? Lyra asked, regaining her strength. I've done business there. Before, Kale replied with a wry smile. Not always the legitimate kind. We all have our pasts. Their journey to Ouroboros Gateway took 3 tense days, during which they established a cautious routine. The ship's systems gradually recovered, though several would need professional repairs. Lyra grew stronger as well, practicing finer control of her energy manipulation. They also learned more about each other during the quieter moments. Kale shared stories of his coalition service, the war injuries both physical and mental that had led him to seek solitude among the stars. Lyra described her homeworld, a place of perpetual twilight where energy currents flowed visibly through the atmosphere, and her work studying cosmic radiation patterns before the Scourge attacked her research vessel. Occasionally, usually when in close proximity, their energy would resonate again, creating brief, controlled connections. These moments became less frightening and more meaningful with repetition, allowing glimpses of deeper emotions and memories that words alone couldn't convey. By the time Ouroboros Gateway appeared on their view screen, a sprawling space station built from salvaged ships and structures fused together in a chaotic ring. Their initial wariness had evolved into something neither could easily define. Welcome to the Gateway, Kale announced as they approached the docking bay. Stay close to me, keep your hood up, and try not to glow in public. Lyra adjusted the oversized jacket and hood Kale had given her to conceal her alien features. I can control it now, she assured him, demonstrating by dimming her markings to near invisibility. Just be careful. This place attracts all sorts: bounty hunters, spies, opportunists. We need to find a mechanic I trust and secure communications. Ouroboros Gateway lived up to its reputation. The corridors teemed with diverse beings from across the galaxy, illicit deals conducted openly in shadowy corners, and the air heavy with exotic substances and mechanical oils. Kale kept Lyra close as they navigated the chaotic marketplace toward a repair bay operated by an old acquaintance. Kale Vance boomed a gravelly voice as they entered the cluttered workshop. A massive figure with 4 arms and oil-stained coveralls emerged from behind a partially disassembled engine. Thought you'd be dead by now. Good to see you too, Morix, Kale replied with a genuine smile. I need discreet repairs and no questions. Morix's multiple eyes glanced at the hooded Lyra before returning to Kale. Trouble? When am I not in trouble? The mechanic laughed. Fair point. Bring her around to Base 7. I'll keep it quiet. While Morix worked on the Stardust Drifter, Kale took Lyra to a secure communication terminal in one of the station's less reputable sectors. There, shielded from surveillance, she attempted to contact the hidden Xylosian network. It may take time for a response, she explained as she input complex sequences into the terminal. The network shifts constantly to avoid detection. They returned to the ship to wait, finding temporary safety in its familiar confines. As night's cycle fell over the station, they sat in the cockpit watching the endless stream of vessels arriving and departing through the massive gateway arch that gave the station its name. If your people respond, what then? Kale asked quietly. Lyra turned to face him, her silver eyes reflecting the distant stars. They will offer sanctuary. For me. For you too, if you wish. And if they don't respond? Then we keep moving, she said simply. The galaxy is vast. The unspoken question hung between them. What were they to each other now? Rescuer and rescued? Fugitives with a common enemy? Or something deeper, formed in the strange intimacy of shared consciousness? Before either could voice these thoughts, Lyra suddenly tensed, her markings flaring beneath her clothing. Scourge, she whispered. On the station. Close. Kale immediately checked the ship's security feed. How? We were careful. They have energy trackers. Consent Xylosian signatures. Lyra's expression was grim. I've tried to mask mine, but we need to move. Now. Kale activated the ship's systems. Morix isn't finished with the repairs, but we'll have to make do. Wait, Lyra said, checking the communication terminal. A response. Coordinates. A meeting point in the veiled sector. Kale programmed the coordinates while monitoring the security feeds. We need to get past the docking clamps first, and I'm seeing Scourge operatives at 3 entry points to this deck. They gathered essential supplies, preparing for immediate departure. Just as they completed preparations, the airlock alarm chimed. Someone was attempting to override the entry protocols. We won't make it out through the main door, Kale said, pulling a weapon from a hidden compartment. Emergency exit through the maintenance shaft. Let's go. What followed was a desperate chase through the labyrinthine corridors and marketplaces of Ouroboros Gateway. The Scourge operatives, disguised as ordinary travelers but recognizable by their coordinated movements and focused energy signatures that Lyra could detect, pursued relentlessly. Kale and Lyra wove through crowded plazas, ducked through maintenance tunnels, and twice narrowly escaped direct confrontation. Kale's knowledge of the station's layout proved invaluable, as did Lyra's ability to sense their pursuers' locations. They were cornered in a service corridor near the docking bay when unexpected help arrived. Morix and 2 other figures Kale recognized as old smuggling contacts appeared at the junction ahead. Thought you might need an escort, Morix called, hefting an impressively illegal-looking weapon. Your ship's ready. Go. We'll hold them off. I owe you, Morix, Kale shouted as they raced past. Add it to your tab, the mechanic replied before turning to face the approaching Scourge agents. They reached the Stardust Drifter with the sounds of combat echoing behind them. Kale launched the ship the moment they were aboard, overriding docking protocols and ignoring the station controller's frantic communications. As they accelerated away from Ouroboros Gateway, a Scourge vessel detached from a nearby docking arm in pursuit. Kale pushed the newly repaired engines to maximum, executing a series of evasive maneuvers while Lyra channeled her energy to temporarily boost their shields against incoming fire. Working together seamlessly, they outmaneuvered their pursuer long enough to make the jump to hyperspace, setting course for the coordinates provided by the Xylosian network. In the sudden quiet that followed their escape, they both exhaled in relief. The Stardust Drifter hummed around them, battered but functional, carrying them toward an uncertain future. That was exhilarating, Lyra admitted, her markings pulsing with residual energy. Kale laughed despite their near-death experience. Is that the Xylosian word for terrifying? She smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that transformed her face. Perhaps. We have many words for different kinds of fear. The fear that wakes you is different from the fear that teaches. And which was this? The fear that binds, she said softly, when faced together. The implications of her words settled between them as the stars streaked past the view screen. They had survived, their relationship tested and strengthened. The future remained uncertain. The Scourge was still out there. Xylo's Corp and possibly the Coalition would hunt Kale as a contract breaker, and Lyra's role in her people's struggle remained unclear. But they faced it together, a partnership forged in the most unlikely of circumstances, all stemming from an offer to share a sleeping bag and the unexpected connection that followed. As the Stardust drifter raced toward the coordinates where the Xylosian network awaited, Kale reached across the console. After a moment's hesitation, Lyra took his hand, her markings glowing softly where their skin touched. No overwhelming mental connection formed this time, just a gentle resonance, comfortable and chosen rather than accidental. What happens when we reach your people? Kale asked, voicing the question that had been troubling him. Lyra's silver eyes met his. I don't know precisely, but I do know that some connections, once formed, cannot be broken by mere distance. She gestured toward the view screen, where distant galaxies sparkled against the void. Space is vast, but not empty. It is filled with unseen currents, invisible bonds that hold everything together. My people study these connections. They are what make the universe whole rather than scattered fragments. Her fingers tightened around his. What happened between us and that sleeping bag? That was unexpected, unplanned, but not meaningless. Kale smiled, the weight of uncertainty lifting slightly from his shoulders. Whatever awaited them at the coordinates, whatever challenges the Scourge might still present, they would navigate them together. Two unlikely allies whose connection transcended the boundaries of their different worlds. The Stardust drifter accelerated into deep space, carrying them toward whatever future awaited, all because of an offer to share a sleeping bag and the unexpected connection that followed.